All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you all for coming today, and thank you very much to both of the candidates for being here, for being willing to do this job in the first place, to opening themselves up to public scrutiny. This wouldn't be, we wouldn't be able to do this without you. And it's a very, very important job, so thank you for throwing your hat in the ring. Before we get started, I also definitely want to thank our sponsors. We wouldn't be able to hold free events like this without them. They are listed on the table tents in front of you. And, of course, I want to thank Steve Simonson and the Billings Association of Realtors for hosting us today. I'd like to invite him to say a couple of words about the bar before we get started.
Well, good morning. Welcome to the Billings Association of Realtors. So, we are an organization of over 3,000 members. If you draw a line from Red Lodge up through Lewistown to Havre and all points east, that's the Billings Association of Realtors. About 1,400 local members here in Yellowstone County. So, and we vote, by the way. So that's an important thing. We're happy to be able to be a venue to host the candidate forums. And one of the other logistic things that I need to mention is bathrooms are just down the hall up here. So welcome to the bar. Thank you.
All right. Well, first and foremost, we just want to give you an opportunity to introduce yourselves to the audience. Talk a little bit about yourselves, your background, why you decided to run for office in the first place, what you hope to accomplish. So please introduce yourself to the audience and explain why you decided to run for city council. We'll start with Mr. Boyette.
I get to be first?
Yep.
Okay. I grew up in Billings. Billings has been good to me. I've had a good career, a nice place to live. I've lived in other places when I was in the service, and Billings turns out to be a nice place. I wanted to keep it that way, and I wanted to give back. So basically, I have the time, energy, and desire. So I figured, why not? And then old Mayor Tooley over there suggested I run for city council, and I won on his behalf. So. Is that all you need, or do you need more?
You got more time if you want to keep going.
A Billings kid, Holy Rosary, Central. I graduated from Eastern Montana College. After that, I went into the service. I was a first lieutenant in the Air Force. I worked on nuclear missiles in South Dakota. When I got out, I became a deputy sheriff here in Yellowstone County again. I was a deputy and a detective for about 9 years. Enjoyed that a lot, learned a lot about people the hard way. Being sometimes the only deputy sheriff in the entire Yellowstone County at midnight, you learn how to talk to people really fast. And after that, I went into banking for the last 30 years. And during that time, I did all my volunteer work. I was a police commissioner for 7 years in Billings, zoning commission for 10 years. I've been on the board for the juvenile detention facility for about 13 years, county board of adjustments. I just figured it was my turn to give back. So then I ran for city council and won, and been just continuing my volunteer work all along. It's been fun.
Thank you. Mr. Mulvaney.
Hi, similar to Mike, born and raised here in Billings. Actually graduated from the same college. We're both alumni of Eastern or MSUB. Been a local here my whole life. Also had parents who were born and raised here. I saw it as a time where I thought I'd go off, venture, go find my career, but I found myself wanting to stay here in Billings. I'm a high school teacher over at West High, teach social studies, history, and I also do some nonprofit work for the Pompey's Pillar. And I like to really see a lot more young people invest in our community and try to build it up, because most of my life it was, hey, you're awesome, you're smart, get the heck out of here. I want the opposite. I want people to either stay or I want them to come back. And I think part of that is showing that youth have more of a say in what happens in the city, and that we care about them enough to invest, but also care enough to make sure that everybody here feels like Billings is a safe place to live and can be a home where they can raise their kids, start a family, things like that.
All right. So we'll have each of you start, a different one of you start each time. So we'll come to Mr. Mulvaney for this next question. You mentioned public safety. Mr. Boya, you were a police officer. And public safety is still the City Council's #1 stated priority. So what do you believe Billings should do to improve public safety?
Well, I believe Billings is doing a lot already to combat public safety. We've started working on CEPDED, crime prevention through environmental design, which I think is great. Being married to my wife, who's from Kansas City, Missouri, she looked at some of our parks and was like, I would never walk in some of these at night. Like, who planned this? And I'm like, well, we're actually starting to implement some things so it'll be safe for that to happen. But also with issues that we have with the Yellowstone County Jail, which isn't just the county jail, it's all the way up through the state. I have a buddy who works in Deer Lodge, and they're maxed out as well, really. It's that we need to give our police officers and our public safety officers a little bit of a break and maybe focus on some crime prevention. Now, there's great things going on with City Council through temporary housing for getting people to their court dates, but I really think we need to focus on giving our police officers a break by focusing on crime prevention through mental health and substance abuse, specifically with like Substance Abuse Connect, Continuum of Care, and I reached out to these groups. I've attended some meetings with them, and the first thing they brought up is like, hey, we'd like to be brought to the table a little bit more. And I went, you're not brought to the table much? And I can only speak for the people I've talked to, but when I think about it, I'm a history teacher. When I'm not an expert in math and science sometimes teaching that, so I need to go talk to the professionals that do that every day. I'm not arrogant enough to believe that I am the expert in everything. I'm going to adhere to the professionals that do it every day and make sure that they are heard and voiced before I make my own decisions.
Thank you. Councilman Boyette?
We asked the public for help, and we did 2 safety mill levies, and we used the money for a variety of things. More police officers, more civilians who work at the police department so that the policemen don't have to go to routine calls that don't need a sworn officer. Code enforcement we enhanced, which has become a big deal. If you don't know about code enforcement, I encourage you to read about it. They're really something to help our city of Billings. We've now implemented a instead of sending the big, I always get calls from people say, well, there's a great big red fire truck driving down the street and it doesn't do anything. Well, it's going to a medical call. So now we have a SUV with 2 EMTs, qualified EMTs, instead of a great big red fire truck. It's going to try to save us money over time. We're also implementing probably this month, maybe Chris will tell us, called a crew crisis unit. Instead of sending a fire truck, an ambulance, and a policeman to a mental health call, we'll be able to send a SUV with an EMT and a mental health specialist. We're going to try to save money, but also impact how we deliver services. One of the things we've also done is ask the 911 service center to categorize their calls, A, B, C, D. When I was a kid and you were a little kid and you cut your finger, what had happened? Mom took care of it. Well, today people call 911. So it jams up our system. You wouldn't believe the calls we get. So education, I think, has got to be one of the biggest things we need to do in the city of Billings. What do you need? What services we have? And what can we do to help you? This is not an easy question. If it was easy crime prevention, we would have already fixed it. It's a continuing process. We're always about 10% short on policemen because of attrition and vacation people retiring. Thank you. And
All right. We'll come back to you for this next question, Councilman. City Council voted to put a $143 million Parks, Trails, and Recreation bond on this November's ballot. Do you support this initiative? Why or why not?
well, 4 years ago, I was sitting in the audience when they came up and said, we want to build a rec center on the south side, and it's going to cost $35 million. And the audience freaked out. Well, today it's $112, $115 million. I've always said from day one, the public needs to vote on it, not the city council. So I was on the team, part of the team that developed what was going to be on the ballot, how much we were going to spend, where the money was going to go. But my goal was always to have the public vote on it. So yes, I voted for it, and I encourage people to vote. Whether they want to vote for it or against it, that's totally up to them. But if we had something like this in the city of Billings, would it enhance our city? Well, sure it would. Why wouldn't it? We'll bring in people from all over the state for ice skating and for basketball and for swimming, where now they leave the state to go do the same thing. So it's a good project. It'll be on the November ballot, and you'll have an opportunity to vote on it.
Mr. Mulvaney?
Mike brought up some pretty good points that I also agree with. As a teacher of history, I love that our state of Montana, a lot of citizens have more choice and are able to vote on more things than some other states and some other types of governments. I believe that the citizens of Billings and citizens of Montana should be able to vote on many different initiatives, and this is one that I was very excited to see went through City Council and now will be on the ballot. As much as I trust people who are going to vote me, and I also trust them to vote on initiatives like this, I always heard from other city council members and other groups that, hey, city council promised different park updates and improvements 40 years ago, and they still haven't gotten done. So I'm glad to see there's some accountability going forward, and this city council really wants to, basically make good on the promises made before. Like, that shows me, like, hey, we're actually trying to do work and not just say stuff. I think the rec center can be great for Billings. I realize that it is a pretty expensive ask, but I think the amount of people that will actually use it, I think the amount of groups like PAR Group, Big Sky Economic Development, all these different groups that are willing to be like, hey, we want to invest in this, that shows, hey, if our local business and our local organizations are going to support it, probably means it's going to be something good for the city. It's going to help with their employees, their customers, and I think it's also going to help with local businesses. Like Mike said, with swimming and things like that. State wrestling here, when we have the AA state wrestling up at the Metro, the amount of money that brings into the hotels and the local businesses. But when we have AA state swimming, we've got to go to Hardin. And nothing wrong with Hardin. My mom and stepdad own a restaurant out there, but I'd rather people come to Billings and spend money in Billings.
All right, we'll come back to you for the next question. I believe both of you are familiar with the concept, but for anybody in the audience who's not really familiar with TIF districts, tax increment finance districts, take a portion of the tax revenue from a specific area and put it in a separate account that is reinvested into that area for improvements to increase property values over a set period of time. So, in general, do you support TIF districts, and what changes, if any, would you propose for how they are used?
I support the TIF districts wholeheartedly. I love seeing specific neighborhoods of Billings getting revitalized and seeing local businesses get put in place and seeing things get cleaned up. I mean, even just talking to the time I volunteered over at the Burr, just learning more about all the different places getting set up around North Park and that area, just really like heartening to see, like, hey, this area that a lot of people see is not a great area is starting to get revitalized. People are starting to go there more. We're going to see a lot more like foot traffic. I don't know, it's part of getting people to want to stay here in Billings to show off that, hey, we aren't just going to let places die. We're going to keep them going, and we're going to put some cool stuff in there. I support it. I think we could continue using those funds to basically make Billings a place where people are wanting to live, wanting to shop, wanting to work.
Councilman Wyatt?
When I was deputy sheriff, we used to drive around on the south side, and I tore off my muffler one night in a street called Bruce Street. Well, guess what now? It's paved. I take people down and show them Orchard Lane and Hollowell Lane and say, these are beautiful streets. There's curb, there's gutter, there's sidewalk, there's lighting. What an improvement it does for the neighborhood. It's incredible compared to what a disaster it was before. So is a TIF a good idea? There's no question. It's a great idea. Some of the controversy we get, though, is how far should we go? Is the rec center part of blight versus a street? So we've had a lot of controversy from people saying we've gone too far with the TIFs. But I think a TIF is a great tool. I encourage us to use them the way they're designed for under the code. If anybody ever wants to see what the work is, go to Hollowell and go to Orchard Lane and look at the streets. They're great, truly.
All right. Another thing that's going to be on the ballot, in addition to in 2024, Billings voters will be asked whether they wish to appoint a study commission to review the city charter. What changes to the charter, if any, would you support?
Me?
Yes.
I've been talking to some of the staff. They have a laundry list of things that need to be fixed for the last 30 years. When I go buy a house, for instance, I can go. I say, well, I want to bid X dollars for this. The city can't do that. They had to go get an appraisal first, which kind of changed the world. So I want to change some of the old, outdated laws, but more importantly, the one thing that I've been concerned about is who in here wants 11 brothers, 11 spouses? How effective is that in a family? There's 11 people on the city council, 10 council members and the mayor. I'm wondering, do we really need 11 people? Could we do better with 5, perhaps? Another thought I had is, could we, some of the cities, some of the counties, they're full-time people. Could we look at the possibility of having full-time council people? One of the things we've done since I've been on the council is actually give duties to the council members to hold them accountable. I'm on the budget committee and the council operations committee. This is a great thing because we actually get to do things where before we didn't. We just voted. So we need the commission to look into the city charter. There's going to be a bunch of things that need to be corrected, and it's going to be up to the citizens to do this.
All right, Mr. Mulvaney.
All right. A lot of what Mike said I also agree with, funny enough. I do think our city council is exceedingly large. I think it also makes it difficult for city council to do as much. If you haven't been to a city council meeting lately, they take a long amount of time, especially because it's busy, important work. But the amount of times questions get asked that are repeated, the amount of times people have to repeat answers they've already said, it becomes a really lengthy process. And I think it's not as efficient as it should be. And I think also getting 6 people, nonetheless 11 people to agree on something can be very difficult. I'm also interested in seeing with our rising population here in Billings, we are going to need to move toward full-time council members or full-time mayor, whatever it needs to be. I just see that we're just going to continue growing, and so we're going to need people kind of at the helm ready at any moment. I know that is a little terrifying for me because I do love teaching so much, but this is an important job where your outreach as a city council member is bigger than just the school. It's bigger than the ward. It's your city. And I think it's our time to just invest in that. I do like the idea of, as I said, citizens voting on things. I do think there's an option that we, at least in the last 4 years, I haven't seen been utilized, is that we can put issues on the charter on the ballot instead of doing a whole big charter assessment. And I think that should be something we do as well, maybe just to like test it out. But I'm personally interested in seeing people look at the charter a bit more.
Okay. I have one more question that I want to ask the candidates, and then we want to turn it over to you as members of the audience to ask questions of these candidates. So think about what questions you have for the city council candidates. So coming back to you, Mr. Mulvaney, a couple of years ago, the city council adopted Project Recode, which was the first major update to the city's land use regulations in decades. It had a major reform to the city's zoning code. How successful do you feel that has been so far in resolving issues, and what further changes would you like to see made to the zoning code?
Well, I think like any legislation that is created by government, it's not perfect. It's going to take some time to kind of figure out, hey, here's some positives, here's some negatives. Overall, I'd say it's doing pretty well. I mean, it has fixed some problems like Harper Madison near the hospitals, figuring out just the labeling of zoning and what it can do. I do think that zoning is a huge job for city council. It covers a lot of the time during meetings. But I think sometimes some of the zoning takes up too much time, and I think certain zonings that the city administrator and the city staff approve don't need to come to city council for a vote. And I don't mean every single zoning, I mean like little minor things. I feel like a committee could basically approve and then go through with. I don't think it needs to always keep that process going. Also, we also need to remember that in Billings we need to be a business-friendly place, and so we need to account for all the different local businesses and all the entrepreneurs that want to be here, because if we help them get into Billings, then they help us with our employees, our customers, and our local economy. Overall, I'd say Project Recode's doing good. I'd like to look into it more, but I know it's a new thing, so got to give it a bit of time.
All right. Councilman Boyette?
Well, I spent 2 years every week working on Project Recode. I was the co-chair for it as well as the gentleman back here was my partner in crime. The city code was this big and it hadn't ever been reviewed. We brought it down to this big. Is it perfect? By no means. The only thing that I really did that I thought was significant is I've made them a requirement that they have to come back to the city council on a regular basis with problems, because we knew that nothing was going to be perfect. So right off the bat, the first 6 months, first quarter, we had Nicole come back and say, this isn't working, let's fix it. Next quarter, this isn't working, let's fix it. So we're learning, and we're learning. The one thing where I think we fell down was the sign code. We didn't know enough about signs. That's still an issue. So is it a better zoning code than we had? Yes. Is it perfect? No. But we are working on it every quarter. And someday it'll be better. And it's a work in progress. Some of the issues we're having with annexation, we're going to revisit our annexation policy to help the zoning go a little faster. But it's a better product, but it's not perfect, but we're working on it. How's that?
All right. Let's hear from some questions from the audience. Please direct your questions to both of the candidates, and then I'll briefly repeat the question for the benefit of the recording. So, questions from you. All right. Simple enough. What role does the city play in workforce housing? Councilman Boyette.
Well, you give us the good one, huh? I know a lot of realtors, and I went out to a realtor the other day and I said, is this your basic $350,000 house? He goes, yes, but now it's $550,000 because of inflation, the cost of materials, the cost of labor. This is a real struggle. Housing, I don't care for who it is. It's not easy. I don't know that there's a simple answer. I really don't. The only thing we can keep working on is the zoning to make it easier for developers. We're looking at one of the things we're doing right now is a cost of service study, which we should have been doing for years. But when you build a building and hook it up to the city, we really don't know what it costs, really. It is to hook up to our water, our sewer. What should we charge you for a road? So I think that's one aspect. I don't know if that'll be a positive or negative for builders. I guess we have to encourage people, but I can't see the city saying we're going to make it 100% cheaper for you to build. I don't think that we have the power to do that. But we talk to every developer that comes through, and if they need something for the zoning, whatever, we're here to help them. We don't always give the best answer because we don't have the solutions.
Mr. Mulvaney?
Well, when it comes to affordable housing, that's always a big priority for me as a teacher married to a teacher who lives in a tiny little rental. I would love to sure buy a house. I sold my dad's house in 2019, around 36 the Monad, for about two-story house, basement, lovely place, nice neighborhood, for about $260,000. I'm on Realtor.com every day because I'd love to buy a house. And just 3 months ago, the next door house that I've been in plenty of times sold for about $430,000. And then I'm like, oh, hey, how are these young college graduates or young people starting their career ever going to be able to live in the city they actually want to live in and keep our labor here? No, there is no easy solution. Everyone likes to say affordable housing, like it's some magic word that we can just come up with. But I think there are some things that, after talking to Councilmember Shaw and even after meeting with our city administrator, there are some options available. One of them, funny enough, was actually the first door I ever knocked on, was over on next to Lampman Park off of 30th and Monad. Old lady who husband just passed, fixed income, living on her own, is getting terrorized by, I'm so sorry, Tom, I still don't remember the name of the actual species, but slang term prairie dog, tearing up the siding and trim on the house. I know it's wild, but you can see photos of it. It's not looking good. And she's wondering what can be done. And I'm like, okay, I need to know if Lampman Park's a neighborhood park, city park, what is it? Find out it's a neighborhood park. Neighborhood voted on keeping it that way, not doing any improvements on it. But after looking at it, I talked to Mr. Kulski and Councilmember Shaw. That could be a place where we could maybe sell the land or donate to a real estate developer so they could cut the cost down and then build some kind of affordable housing. Also, keep up the zoning work so that we still have people who are able to live in spaces. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions from the audience? All right. What is the City Council's vision for annexation and developing the city in a more organized way? We'll come back to Mr. Mulvaney.
Oh, I can't speak for the current City Council. I know that with annexation comes houses that are within city boundaries, city property, which means property taxes will go into city government, which means income for the city to be able to spend on various projects. However, I'm also aware that expanding infrastructure out to neighborhoods can sometimes be expensive, and there are plenty of experts in urban planning that have been doing studies on, hey, is the money coming in for those property taxes making up for the infrastructure going out? I've been talking to some experts in town, and I've also been reading on some people like Charles Marone and Strawn Towns and trying to kind of figure out how to weigh that. I do think sometimes with our Billings growing population, we immediately resort to, hey, we need to get as wide as possible. And I'm aware that realtor and land and housing is based on a market. It's where people want to live. I do think we can create housing with help from different organizations, especially TIF districts, that will create housing that is good in the city, kind of work more on infill. But I also realize that we are going to still need to expand and annex, but I do think we sometimes resort to annexation a little too much. I mean, one of the things I get asked when I start going around my ward, not my ward as much because we're kind of solid in the region of the West End, but up in the Heights and out far west, they're always talking about water and utilities. And I know that's not something that can be solved with a simple solution, but I do think we need to consider that when we go to consider annexation.
Councilman Boyette?
I wasn't on the council then, but I was totally against Rehberg Ranch and Ironwood. They were too far out for me. I didn't like the idea of leapfrogging, but go talk to a developer. And he goes, why would I want to go downtown and tear the building down and spend 3 times as much money to take a building down and rebuild it than I can go out to a nice piece of flat ground and build what I want to build easily, cheaper. And that's really what it comes down to a lot of the times. It's just sheer economics. We just zoned 240 acres on the 70th and Rimrock. It's a blank slate. The developer can build anything he wants versus there's no 240 acres around here that he can build. So then he's limited on what he can buy, but leapfrogging is a real problem. I totally agree. One of the things we've talked about at the council is an incentive. Let's make it cheaper for you to build here so you can do the infill. But again, that's where we need to know what the cost of services are instead of guessing what it costs for you to hook up. TIF's a good idea, except it's only good in blighted areas. We don't have blighted areas on the West End, so you can't use that money. A lot of it's up here. Do you want to be an open space? Do I want a bigger lot, smaller lot? Planned neighborhood developments. It's hard to do a planned neighborhood development on 12 acres or on a corner lot versus I can go out in the country and get 40 acres or 100 acres and build whatever I want. So a lot of it's this, a lot of it's money, a lot of it's ease of working. It's easier to do flat ground than it is tearing something down. The other thing is, what is the price of the land? Look what you can buy an acre almost to $100,000 now. Well, if I'm going to spend that much money and put in curb and road and sewer and water, I want to do it on a bigger project so I can take my economy of scale. So I can understand why the developers want to go the West End, but I agree that leapfrogging is not a good idea for us, the city, because we're having to extend it. We had to put a fire station out at 54th and off of Rimrock, and we had to put a police department there. Well, now what happens? Do we have to go even farther? So that's a good thing and a bad thing. There's no perfect solution to any of this.
All right. Any other burning questions out there? Julie?
How do you feel about the need for a non-discrimination ordinance in the city of Billings?
Short and sweet. What are your thoughts on the need for an NDO in Billings, Councilman Boyette?
Well, I have 3 jobs as a city councilman, believe this or not. 1 is to show up to meetings. 2 is to vote. And the 3rd one is to respond to my constituents. Okay, that's my job. If that's one of the things in the city charter we need to fix. How many people in Ward 5 have come to me in the last 3.5 years saying they were discriminated against on whatever reason? How many people have come to me? Anybody? So I guess at this point I'd say no, we don't need it. For my ward, I haven't had any complaints about anything. And I'm on the phone all the time. Come to me if you got a problem. I tell people, I can't fix your family, but I can fix your road. At least call me and give me a chance. I've never heard anybody in my ward come complain.
All right. Mr. Mulvaney.
Funny enough, I actually see a decent amount of people in this city who are dealing with issues when it comes to something about themselves that they are unable to change. I believe there are plenty of people in Billings who would love to stay here but are feeling, hey, I don't feel welcome here. This not in our town stuff that we see all about anti-Semitism, not our town. Well, I don't think that sometimes translates over to discrimination against people of different sexual orientations and lifestyles. I've seen our cities pass similar ordinances, and I don't really understand why it hasn't been passed here. Again, it would have to come with like religious exemptions for churches and things like that, because we do not want to violate anybody's First Amendment rights. But I do think if we want to keep people here and we want to show that we're a place that people want to move to, live in and work in, we should show support for everyone involved who's not breaking a law or doing anything to obstruct us. We should support the people here, and it may not seem like a big thing due to maybe small amount of population we have in the city, but it's enough. They're our neighbors. They work with us. They're our customers. We need to support them.
All right. Any other questions from the audience? All right. How do you plan to work with the county and the state legislature when reelected or elected? Mr. Mulvaney.
Big thing right off the bat, our state legislature, whether you love them or hate them, are making laws about how cities and how local governments can go about their work. And I think city council and the county need to really go up to the legislature and show them confidence that, hey, we know what we're doing. We're the ones actually working in our areas. We need to keep some of our control and be able to do things we need to do. Also, I think Mike and I will probably agree with this, is public safety. It's, like I said earlier, it's not a county or a city issue. It is a statewide issue. Through the justice system, through our courts, our judges, we are getting maxed out. And I think we need to appeal to the legislature. With the city and county so intermingled, I think we just need to work with them. And I appreciate that Mike has had experience with the county, which helps us work with the county a decent amount, but I think we still need to continue that going forward, because we're going to keep continuing the annexation issues with the sale of recreational marijuana in the county, but not in the city. That kind of caused some issues when we started annexing, so we're still going to need to kind of continue going forward, working with those groups.
Councilman Boyette?
Well, I had coffee with one of the county commissioners yesterday and the sheriff yesterday. And we do this all the time because it's not the city and the county, it's us. One of the problems we brought up before the state legislature is one item was parolees. Bozeman got 1 parolee during the year. We got 139 parolees. Okay. What's the recidivism of these folks? Unfortunately, it's over 50%. So Bozeman's not going to get the crime that we are. Sometimes we feel like we're being inundated with people that aren't our people. Most of these people weren't Billings people, but we have the services here. We have the hospitals. We have the mental health center. We have the crisis unit. We have everything, all the needs. So a lot of the people gravitate here. But the state, guess what? they don't give us the money to fund these people. So it's kind of one of those unfunded mandates. We get all the parolees, but we don't get the cooperation and help to fix it. I know I'll get yelled at for saying this, but oftentimes we feel like the state doesn't like Billings because we're kind of out there in the distance and we're kind of a stepchild, and we feel like we're not getting all the support. So we do have, I met yesterday with our legislative affairs people from Washington. We meet regularly with our local lobbyists that go to the state. We're always talking to the state about our needs. Pam Puritan is one of the ones that helps. We have to keep the dialogue going. That's the only way we're going to get the state to help us with our problems. And I don't know that we can fix all of the problems, like the jail, for instance. The other day, they told us they were at 600 people. Well, their capacity is only 400, give or take. That's a lot of people. So we met yesterday about trying to develop a misdemeanor facility, a holding facility for up to 24 or 48 hours just to get the people off the street. Thank you, Dan.
It's worth mentioning also to voters that in 2024, when we have the opportunity to review the city charter, we'll also have the opportunity to review our form of county government. Question that came to my mind while we were talking earlier. So we mentioned earlier that public safety is the City Council's #1 stated priority. City Council adopts a new set of priorities every year. In the future, I mean, public safety is always going to be #1, I'm sure. But what other priorities would you like to see on the list? Are there any that you would like to see elevated over some of the current priorities that City Council has? You know, what is there any sort of grand, broader leadership or broad direction that you'd like to change for the city government? Councilman Boyette.
Well, I mean, one of my pet peeves that I get calls on all the time is traffic. We have some of the worst drivers in the whole state of Montana live in Billings, Montana. And just go stand out at Grand and Rehberg and just stand there, and you don't have to be very bright to figure it out. So I confronted the chief the other day and said, look, chief, we just had a person killed here. A drunk driver from Boise ran a red light. Our people are running red lights. The state of Montana won't let us put in cameras to stop these people. So I asked him to do something. Well, he put up one of those little meters that says how fast you're going. So I'm going to yell at him today and say, you put it at the corner. You need to put it down the middle of the street where everybody's driving 85 miles an hour. So, I mean, that's just a little bitty thing, but I keep saying if we can get people to slow down, pay attention, follow the rules, maybe the rest of it will come along. But to me, that's a frustrating thing, is the traffic.
Mr. Mulvaney.
I'd say a big thing is just transparency. I think in Billings, our city government tries to be very transparent in what we do, but I also think that as a person who decided to run for city council March, finding everything I needed to find to be able to run was a little bit of a hassle, and I'm not gonna lie, sometimes while applying and looking for things, I was like, are they trying not to have people run for stuff? Are they trying not to have people? Which is obviously a very cynical point of view, and I realize it's not that. There's a lot of different aspects when I start getting into this, but I think, hey, it's great. You can see a city council meeting online, but the average person watching a city council meeting from 5:30 to sometimes midnight, there are people that work night jobs. There are people taking care of their kids. There are people having to go do all sorts of stuff they're not going to be able to. Nonetheless, go to city council and sit in the meetings on some of the nice, lovely wooden benches that are so comfy. I think hiring our communications director is a good start, but I think we need to be more transparent. I think we need to show up more digitally. I am a subscriber to the Billings Gazette, but I can tell you one thing, I am one of the few of my generation that has a subscription to the Billings Gazette or has cable TV so they can watch KTVQ or Color 8. Streaming so much cheaper, we get more options. We're gonna go to that now. We need to find other ways to be able to put stuff that's happening in our city, either through social media, digital forums, something. I don't exactly have all the answers right now, but that's one of the things I'm going to be invested in.
Yes.
that I
Yeah.
can consume and become
So
interested in.
your question is, how do we make information on the City Council website more digestible, tagging on to that transparency question? So we'll start with Bo.
Well, I think part of it is using social media. I think what I can remember is you're referring to a council member. When I was looking at city council stuff, I saw some of Councilmember Shaw's stuff when she first got elected and seeing her recaps the meetings. And I want to do something similar, but I think also our city government can do that as well. I think, another thing, we talked about signs earlier, and when it comes to those digital signs, I think they can be used for city things, like things we need to address in the city or big events that are going to happen. I'd like to see more use of those signs being used for that, because I know there's issues with signs close to residential areas and things like that, but I think there is some use for it other than just advertising. And our thing is, I think just maybe like, I know this is starting to sound really expensive, but some kind of like mailer that's out to different businesses or different things saying like, hey, here's kind of what the city's working on, here's some things cities are doing. And I think just more focus on digital social media, which I think the city communications director is probably going to get into. I know she's been transitioning from news to journalism quasi-government work, so I know it's a transition.
So, Councilman Boyette?
I went to a county commissioners meeting, weekly meeting, and it lasted 12 minutes. They work full time. They know they don't have to go ask 50 questions. They already know the questions because they have time to talk to the staff. I've always been critical of us having a meeting that lasts from 5:30 until, we've been there till 1 o'clock in the morning asking questions. And to me, again, that's part of our system. It's also the mayor's responsibility to shorten the meeting. The mayor has the ability to shrink that up. I've gone back and watched the council meeting on, excuse me, on Channel 7, where I can fast forward. One of the concerns I have is I don't get enough calls from people who care. I mean, the only time I get calls from people is if there's a problem. If the world's safe, people don't bother to do anything. Sometimes I think we need more engagement from the community. You can tell that sometimes by the lack of people that even show up to a meeting. And I agree the benches are the worst things, and they're going away, by the way. I was on the committee to buy a new building, and it's going to be done, and you're going to have a cushioned seat. How's that? No, it's been frustrating to see the lack of support from the public, as well as us giving the information out. We do have a new PIO to give that information out, but I don't know that we've used her abilities at all to what we should be doing. She kind of had to make up her own job description, which I thought was kind of tacky in my mind. But yeah, it's a work in progress. Yeah, you're right. If you have ideas, send them to us. Find your city councilman or our city administrator and say, these are some of my ideas to make the system work better. Send them to us. Why wouldn't we listen to you?
All right. I think we have time for one more question from the audience before we wrap up. So anybody have anything that's just really burning a hole in their pocket? I saw your hand over here first.
Yes, I have a boost.
So two-part question. You believe there was a conflict of interest related to the Parks bond vote, and why was the rec center placed where it was? So, Councilman Boyette.
Councilman Rupsis is right here. He was on the Parks Board. He doesn't receive a personal benefit. If he owned the land where the park went, if he worked for the company that was going to build it, there would be a conflict of interest. But being on a commission, a free commission that you don't get paid for or anything, to me that's not a conflict of interest because he doesn't receive any benefit from his vote. The second thing is we own the property down at Amen Park. We have the room there for a parking lot and the building. We already have a stake in it with all of the kids down there playing soccer. Go down on a Saturday, you see the people are there. This is just an extension of that. We already own the land, and there was a nice spot for it. And plus it's on an area, a blighted area where we could get the TIF money to help pay for this. $25 million of this bond issue is already being paid for by the TIF because it is in a blighted area.
Mr. Mulvaney.
The way I see it, since Tom was part of the Parks Department for so long on the Parks Board, he has experience in the parks. He has experience on wrecks and trails, and he, honestly, when I go to city council meetings, he's the foremost expert in these things. So when he gives his opinions, beliefs, that shows me, hey, I should want that. Now, do I see why you kind of want it to be in different neighborhoods, different parks? I understand that, but I do think when it comes to money, especially when asking the property owners to pay for it, it does go down a little easier if you do have TIF funding and things from it. As an assistant soccer coach for 3 years, I was down at Amen almost every day, and it sure does get packed on those weekends. So that will probably be another logistics issue that'll come into play, is the amount of space that's used just for the soccer parents. Nonetheless, now rec center, I think that's going to be something they'll have to figure out. But with that TIF funding and the space owned by the city, it makes sense with the amount of land they have. And also, I think that there are kids in those neighborhoods that could use that rec center more than other places. I think other neighborhoods, like even mine, we're so close to West High, you could go use those facilities, or there's other gyms you could go use or things like that. But in that neighborhood, I can't think of a place that those kids could go use better than the rec center. So I think it'd be a good opportunity for them.
I checked the clock, and I do think we have time for your question if you'd still like to ask it.
Sure. All that.
All right. Who is driving the vision for growth at the city? So we'll come back to, Councilman Boyette, right? I think so.
You know, I think city government is a reactionary. Somebody calls and says we have a pothole, so we go fix it. Sometimes we don't go out and look for the potholes. From my experience, the vision, we've not done a very good job of sitting down with a whole bunch of people and say, well, where do we want to go now? Usually it's driven by developers saying, I want to put in there's one developer that says, I want to annex 720 acres and build houses. Okay, well, that's a big deal. We, the city and the county, didn't say we want to develop this 720 because we didn't have the money to do it. So I think a lot of it is driven by business and the developers. We need to do a better job of saying, well, what are we going to do about the roads? I think our infrastructure is terrible. We have the same streets we had when I grew up. They haven't changed. No wonder our traffic is becoming a problem because we're not looking far enough ahead. That's a good question, Dave. We need to get maybe a think group of citizens and county people and city people together to say, what is our ultimate vision? Where do we want to go? Do we want Laurel to be part of Billings one day? Do we want Lockwood to be part of us one day? Will the Heights become its own city someday? It's the 6th largest city in the state of Montana all by itself. Should we have rethought about how to get to the Heights 30 or 40 years ago instead of having one little road between the Metro and that? I don't think we did a good job of that. So, yeah, you're right. I don't know that we have a good vision for the future. We react, and I think we do a good job of reacting, but I don't know that we have a good vision for the future.
All right. Mr. Mulvaney, I should have come to you first. Sorry about that,
good,
but
whatever.
Go for it.
I think it's hard not to be reactionary when we just went through a global pandemic where everything went crazy and people realized, hey, there's more online jobs than there possibly are, and I can go live wherever I want and work for that same company. And I think people are coming here, especially when they're making more money and they could buy a house cheaper, which caused a lot of our housing issues that we currently have, which is all over the nation. But I do think it is a lot of money that's usually causing growth or usually pushing us toward growth. And I don't disagree with it. I mean, if people want to live out west or live more out north where they want more space, I understand. My dad was the kind of guy, he's like, I don't really want to be close to my neighbors. I kind of want my own little area, my own little land. And people have the money, they're going to go buy land and do that. But I think that the city does need to start planning more for the future. I think a lot of times we are just trying to catch up with what's getting thrown at us, which I think seeing like a full-time council or more changing up that charter a bit will help with that. Being able to have people on the job on focus actually have the time to plan, because right now you've got meetings on Mondays, work sessions in the regular business, then you got the committee meetings, and then all the other jobs you got on top of that aren't city, probably not able to spend much time actually planning for the future. So I think we do need to have some kind of committee that it's planning for the future, and then work on that charter a bit to be able to allow us to prioritize how is the city going to go, and how can we, instead of reacting to it, plan it with the county, the state legislature, and our local businesses and entrepreneurs in the city.
All right. Well, to wrap us up today, we heard quite a bit of agreement among the candidates, but at the end of the day, voters have to choose one or the other. So as a way of closing remarks, Councilman Boyette, what are some of the accomplishments you would point to from your first term? And respectfully, why should voters re-elect you?
Well, I guess one of the things I've been thinking about this is the city council elected me deputy mayor. And it may not be a big deal, but that tells me a lot. We have, if you watch the meetings, you'll see that there's sides. Half the side votes for this one time and the other half votes for this side. They picked me to be the middle person. And I thought that was important so that I can talk to both sides. I really like that idea. I also was one of the main people dealing with buying the new city hall. No longer the Stillwater people, it's the new city hall. And how much did you pay for that? You personally didn't come, any money came out of your pocket. And that should be, we're working on it today. Our new city hall will be opening hopefully towards the end of the year. And then we're going to sell City Hall. So I think that's a big deal, as well as the West End water reservoir will be 2 giant Lake Elmos on the west end. To me, those are big issues that we, the council, have done, and I'd like to see those through to completion.
All right. Mr. Mulvaney, can you identify an issue from the last 4 years where you would have voted differently from Councilman Boyette, and respectfully, why should voters choose you?
Well, for one, I believe that, I don't know if this is the last 4 years, but the last time an NDO came to the table at City Council, I believe that that should have been voted, yes, we should have voted for an NDO. I think the amount of things that are happening at the Billings Public Library, that are happening around the schools, is showing that we do have that presence here in Billings, and they are saying, we're going to have other people support us, so we're probably going to leave and go somewhere where they see is better. Whereas I think of the Magic City as a place where everybody should want to live. Another thing is I see a lot of mill levies, bonds, things that get passed, because that's how governments run, especially local governments. And I saw that a public safety mill levy was passed, and I see different things coming out of like the family trauma center. I see, as Councilmember Boyette brought up, EMTs and kind of like crisis units, but we're still seeing issues of crime. So, okay, we did a public safety levy, we got some police officers in. What are we doing to keep our police officers to want to work in Billings? How are we helping people who want to stay here and work here after we hire them? What's going to keep people here? And I think we are showing little changes to kind of pat ourselves on the back, but I don't think we are focusing on some of the long-term solutions. It's kind of short-term, and I think that's something I'm invested in.
All right, let's give both these candidates a big round of applause. I want to thank our sponsors again. Once again, we wouldn't be able to do events like this without them. And on the back of those table tents that you see around the room, you'll see our upcoming Coffee with Council events. So if you want to check out what's going on in other wards, you'll be able to visit those events as well. And once we have the recordings of these Coffee with Council events ready to publish, you'll be able to find them at that QR code as well. Thank you all once again for coming.